This is Becoming Inclusive from the Kaleidoscope Group, where we're thinking differently about diversity, equity, and inclusion for more empowered people at work. We're committed to real change, and that begins with real conversations. Welcome in.
Hi, I'm Reggie Ponder, and welcome to another episode of Becoming Inclusive. I am here with my co-host, Catherine Potts. Kat, it's that time again. Welcome back.
I know. Hey everyone.
And then we have the absolute pleasure. And what's so funny is that I've been trying to get Mary on this podcast for I want to say day one. So I am so happy that we have Mary Hunter, who is the Senior Vice President of the Assessment Practice at the Kaleidoscope Group. Mary, yay!
And this is the second time, so this is a true blessing.
Yeah, it really is, because I'm like, Mary, can you come on? Can you come on? And now we get her back. So thank you for joining us again, Mary.
Thank you, Kat and Reggie, for having me. I'm excited to be here, and I'll come back as many times as you want. I've got lots to say.
Oh, wow. This is being taped, right?
Yeah.
Did you hear that?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, we're good to go. Maybe we can start and make Mary a co-host, because she just said she'll come back.
Okay. Mary's a co-host. Brian Johnson's a co-host. You told Mitch he's a co-host. Everyone, we've got about 3 new co-hosts, so we'll just keep that.
Reggie, cat's on to you.
Yeah. I might need to just reel in my enthusiasm just a little bit. So Mary, one of the things, because you are the assessment practice person, one of the things we've talked about before is this whole idea of benchmarking. And I'm a little bit confused, and I'm going to put in some sports terms in a few minutes, because I'm the sports guy. So I'm going to put in some sports terms, and hopefully it'll still be applicable to what we're talking about. But you believe that benchmarking, particularly external benchmarking, could possibly be problematic?
I would go a little further and say it is problematic when it comes to trying to measure elements of your culture, organizational practice. Benchmarking serves a really great purpose in certain business instances, but not within kind of the employee perceptions around culture and organizational practice.
So you helped me. So you've blown up my whole sports thought, because as a sports guy, I play a lot of basketball, and I want to know what the other team is doing. I want to know how well they're doing from a 3-point perspective. I want to know how they're playing defense and what all the analytics that go along with that. And you're saying that kind of benchmarking is okay?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be honest here. When it comes to sports, I'm not as in the know. So I'm trying to think, would it be as relevant? Because when it's relevant is when you want to be able to measure yourself against somebody else because you're trying to achieve the same thing, right? Think about retailers too. Armani and Walmart, both are retailers, but do they really want to benchmark against each other, figure out what they're doing so that they can get an edge? No, because they're not competitors, right? Getting within that competitive set, even within that too, does Walmart really, want to understand Target, Costco in that same way where they want to mirror them? They don't want to mirror them. They want to figure out where they can identify their competitive edge and what makes them unique.
What I'm hearing too from what you're saying is benchmarking needs to be much more intentional than it can be at times, because to kind of piggyback off what Reggie's saying, it could be that's a really general way to benchmark, right? If you're using a sports analogy and you're like, let's see what their team is doing, let's see that kind of thing. But why are you doing that? Because if your reason isn't something that's not so general, or if they're not a direct competitor, you're not trying to get an edge, then you're just getting data that may not be relevant at all to you.
Yeah, that's why I would say it isn't necessarily about how to benchmark appropriately, but first starting with, is benchmarking even appropriate in this instance?
Right.
And, one of the examples that we use is with employee engagement, because when clients come to us, they are likely wanting to, measure some element of diversity, equity, inclusion in their workplace. We're a DEI consultancy. I head up our assessment and analytics practice. So we're all about the DEI data, right? And so we do a lot of DEI surveys. And so these are surveys among employees, right? The best point of reference that our clients have are their employee engagement. That's usually the closest that they've been to surveys among employees. And it's kind of a standard practice to measure your employee engagement results against a benchmark. A lot of times it might be an industry. So again, looking at those retailers, it could be by geography, those who are based in the US or in a certain region, whatever it is that's relevant for you. And because clients come to us with that point of reference, they're frequently wanting a benchmark for their DEI results. And that's kind of what prompted us to look a little bit more into how impactful are these benchmark comparisons. Because in my experience with survey research, I found that a lot of times they can unintentionally point clients in the wrong direction, get them to take a left turn when they really needed to make that right turn.
And so Mary, using the retail piece, saying that you don't want to talk sports, thanks a lot.
Sorry, Reggie.
It absolutely hurts me.
I know.
But using the retail area to talk about this, is that Target would want to know how employee engagement is at Target, no? I mean,
yeah.
at Walmart. At Walmart. Wouldn't they want to say, all right, we're in the retail space. Our direct competitor is Walmart. We see maybe that the employees seem happier, that they seem more engaged, that they stay a little bit longer, all that type of stuff. Wouldn't I want to know or benchmark myself against Walmart?
Yeah, absolutely. In this case, I can see why you may want to just simply know. These are direct competitors, right? But that's not necessarily how benchmarking databases work. If Walmart and Target are using two totally different suppliers, then the retailer benchmark that they're comparing to may not even include their direct competitor, right? They may not be in there. So it's not always as simple as I'm going to give you this list of my 5 top competitors. Now give me comparisons to them. It doesn't really work like that. Most of the time they're comparing to a very large database or sometimes a very small database, depending on the supplier. Are we talking Gallup? Are we talking IBM? Are we talking a boutique firm that maybe only runs 50 engagement surveys a year, right? So are they doing thousands? Who's in there? That's one of the biggest concerns that we have with benchmarking comparisons is when you get that comparison, you're not getting singular, like to my top competitors. You're getting, let's say, again, that industry comparison. Who's in there? Who are you truly getting compared to? Are they comparable? Are they these organizations that you do consider to be vital, right? And then how old is that data? For a lot of the smaller firms too, that may be measuring, let's say more niche areas like what we do, diversity, equity, inclusion, their normative databases may only have 50 to 100 cases in them. And they may need to use a rolling 3-4 year average to even get to 100 because maybe they're only doing 15 to 20 of these surveys a year. So what you're getting now is a comparison to data that predates COVID. How relevant is that? You really need to start to question what's behind it to better understand if you're actually getting anything from that comparison, or if it's giving you an indication that things are a certain way because it's not the direct competitors that you're worrying about, or because the data is old, or there's a lot of things that can really mess with that and make that comparison invalid.
So I want to come back to that, Mary, but I know that one of the things that because you corrected me right at the beginning, and I do not like to be corrected, but that's okay. I said it could possibly be problematic, and you said it is problematic, and that one of the reasons of trying to do this external benchmarking, for one of the reasons that it could be problematic, is that it can kind of lull the company into complacency. Talk about that.
Sure. So we covered a little bit of the quality issues, right? If you don't have enough cases, are they really your direct competitors? But the other is, let's imagine that you do have an incredible, robust benchmark database like Gallup does, like IBM does, like some of these other organizations do. We looked far and wide for research and found a couple of studies, and one in particular was with a huge database, and they actually looked at their own norms and found that there was very little variance in the scores across industries, geography, and role. So basically, when you're combining hundreds, thousands, and thousands of cases, you're getting lots of highs and lows, and they're all mixing together to create something kind of flat. So that also isn't necessarily very helpful in a comparison, because likely your comparison to that benchmark isn't going to be very great either. And what we find a lot of times is when leaders are seeing like, oh, we're above the benchmark or within 2 percentage points of the benchmark, it's a great reason to just not do anything. That's the complacency. And one of the points that I've brought up is, what about areas like feeling valued as an employee? We know this is critical to the employee experience, right? We also know that some version of this is measured in quite a few different employee surveys. We also know that there's lots of benchmark comparisons, and there were many leaders out there that were saying, hey, we're so close to the benchmark. That means we're doing fine, don't need to act on it. And here we are in the middle of the great resignation, great rejection, whatever we want to call it. And all the current research is indicating that not feeling valued is a main reason why a lot of people are leaving. And they aren't feeling valued partially because they're not feeling respected, a sense of belonging, like they have a voice, a lot that's connected to inclusion, right? But this is a perfect example of, you may have had lower scores, but because you looked at your benchmark comparisons and saw, well, these are low too, so this must just be normal. You avoid critical action that could have saved you.
Wow.
Tremendous amount of money, time, and heartache, right? That comes with losing such a large percentage of your workforce.
So how do you, my mind kind of goes to when you're talking to a leader, because sometimes it can be hard to motivate someone to do something based on this is what could happen if you don't do X, right? So how, what are some recommendations of how you would motivate a leader to be proactive versus reactive in that space? Because to your point about complacency, it's easy to be like, oh, we're fine. We're right there. We're a little bit above average and do nothing. And some may not be as motivated to do anything just because of a potential outcome of that. Like, yeah, the great resignation is happening now, but it wasn't happening, 2-3 years ago. So how do we get leaders to that place of understanding where you don't want to be as reactive when it comes to that?
And before you answer that, Mary, I want to glob on the fact, since we're talking about benchmarking, is this whole issue of every company is having the great resignation issue, so to speak. And so now I just say, well, everybody's doing it. So do I really need to do anything different because this is happening across the board, to what you were saying before?
Wow. Okay. So where do I start? The first,
we asked two different. We asked two different questions, Reggie. You were not piggybacking on my question.
Well, actually, yeah, I was piggybacking. So let me reframe. Is that if we're looking at people saying, I'm not going to do something because of the norm, they can also say that from a great resignation perspective, I'm not going to do anything because of the norm. The norm, I'm in the norm, whether it's on people thinking I feel valued, and I'm in the norm over whether people are leaving my company. I'm doing as good as everybody else. As I'm looking to compare, I'm good on all these measures. So why move? So I was actually piggybacking there.
So I think that the reason why the Great Resignation is getting so much airtime is because it's reached critical mass where leaders really can't just sit there and say, well, it's happening to everyone. I don't know how many times, and I'm going to be all bougie right now and say that I've driven up to a Starbucks and it's posted that it's closed because they don't have enough employees. So they're losing revenue left, right, and center. I know, right? Just keeping it real. That's my example. And we have seen with many of our clients too, how much they're losing by not being able to deliver because they don't have the talent right now. So I don't know if there are too many leaders out there that are sitting there saying like, well, I mean, everybody's quitting everywhere. Let's not do anything because their business is so seriously impacted by it right now. So what we're trying to point out is that maybe some of this could have been avoided. It could have been a competitive edge for companies if they would have addressed some of these issues early on.
Yeah.
And you have to kind of address what you said. Well, then how can they avoid this, right? It's by starting by measuring what matters most to your organization. So connecting whatever you measure, whether it's with engagement or whether it's with diversity, equity, and inclusion, to your business strategy, and better understanding what do we need to measure to be able to have success. And for a lot of these organizations, it would be, how do we make sure that we avoid and minimize attrition, right? That's something that businesses are going to be facing on an ongoing basis. So measuring that. And then by really identifying the best way to analyze your data, because having relevant content is going to be important, but what do you do with it is going to also help direct the recommendations that you'd make on the back end. And nobody wants to be gathering data just for data's sake, right? Let's not stop doing surveys just because we're supposed to and start acting on them. The survey fatigue, everybody's learned at this point that there's really like no such thing, or it's limited. It's a lot more of like, I'm so sick and tired of somebody asking me to participate in a survey, getting my opinion, and then doing nothing with it. Mm-hmm. So let's start designing to be able to act on our surveys. And the first thing is, what decisions are you going to make with the data? What's relevant to gather with that? And then how can we analyze this in a way that will help you make the best decision? And what we've pointed out in the paper that we've written recently is that comparing to external benchmarks is likely not one of those ways. It's not going to support your analysis to help point in the direction of what should we do, because it can actually lead you to making the wrong decisions, doing nothing when you should have, or you may be relying on comparisons that are like mathematically unsound because they're very small, or they just simply aren't relevant because somebody used a broad industry term that doesn't actually include your direct competitors.
So give me an example, Mary, of if you could, when we're talking about retail, how it might be different for what a Walmart might look for, you said what matters most, and what a Target might look for, what matters most. Because I hear you when you say what matters most, but if it's attrition for everybody, then it's the same, right?
Right. I mean, I think what matters most to each one of them with their internal employees is very much connected to their brand in and of themselves. Both are kind of these mass retailers, but both have very different positioning in the marketplace, right? One being very value oriented, and Target actually being a great example of a company that has really tried to brand itself through its differentiation and about like leveraging diversity and inclusion in their branding itself too. So even with those, they could be direct competitors, but when it comes to their employees, are they stealing employees from each other? Employees dying to work at Walmart when they currently work at Target? Not really, because they have very different cultures and very different employee value propositions too. So you're going to each one of these for different reasons. That's another reason why it might be nice to know what each other is doing, but I wouldn't necessarily let that dictate my decisions about how to act on my survey. I would look internally to my own strategy. What is the strategy for Target? What is the strategy for Walmart and Target, for their brands, for their employees? How are we going to best support what we're trying to achieve with what we're learning now in our survey?
I love that, Mary. That example really helps me. Is that are the people who are working at Walmart, once they quit, are they running over to a Target? And are the people from Target, when they leave, are they running over to Walmart? So are we looking at different people? Are we talking to them differently? Are we servicing them differently? And that creates that differentiation that we're talking about in their plans and their marketing and their strategy. So that really sticks with me.
Absolutely.
And it made me think about a point you made around like how to analyze data, right? Because some people can see analyzing data as, oh, here's the data. I'm just going to look at this is what it says, right? But it sounds like you're talking about there's another level of analyzing, and it's almost custom, right, by each company.
It is, because a lot of times clients will say in the kind of analytical stage, where should we be trying to get at with, let's say, our equity measures? Where should we be at on having a voice? What score should I be shooting for? And there is not an easy answer to that for a lot of what we're talking about today, because there is no singular score for what's perfect for equity, partially because employee expectations for all of these different elements vary according to where it is that they're going to work and who they are. And so your workforce is comprised of kind of a unique set of individuals, right? We can't say that Amazon, which is also an online retailer, has a workforce that mirrors the demographics of Walmart, which is also a pretty powerful online retailer, right? They're very different demographics, and there's very different experiences. There's a lot that's different. That also includes expectations, what employees want. That means that your goals for where you want to score on different elements are going to be unique to you too. What you want your strengths to be, where you want to score highest, and may also be directly connected to your organizational culture and how it is that you're leveraging people to support your business strategy achievement, business goal achievement. All of that's going to vary. So that's why the first place to look is internally and determine what are these measures of success for you? What are you as an organization trying to achieve to better support on the outcome, as opposed to looking externally for just some magic number that works everywhere.
And while that really makes sense for me, Mary, help me understand how, though, do I set my metrics where they're not too low? So, because I think you got my question. Go ahead.
Sure. Like I said, the first is to start with deciding what those metrics should be and starting to determine some success criteria by linking this to your business strategy. But the next would be, we recommend using internal benchmarks as a powerful comparison too. These are comparing to either a dominant population. So if you're, let's say, a 95% white population, you might compare other scores to that to better understand differing perspectives and experiences, or it could be to the total organization, and you compare different groups. And these groups could be demographic, like race, ethnicity, gender, age, or they could be a little bit more organizational, like your hierarchy or level, the role, department. But those can be extremely powerful, and they can be extremely powerful measures where you would want your employees to have similar experiences in the workplace, right? So when you see huge gaps, that can help set goals for next time around and help drive to where it is that you need to act.
So organizationally, you're saying that if I were to use that measurement, organizationally, I could look at my middle managers and see that they feel like they belong, they feel empowered. But then I look at the next level down and see that most of those, from a benchmarking perspective, that many of those feel differently, not as empowered, not like they belong. And that can help me internally say that, wow, why is that? What's the difference if we're in the same company, but from a level perspective, we're looking at it totally differently?
That's right. And I would add to that, intersectionality is key. I think a lot of organizations have looked at, let's say, role or even department or team. But within that, each team, each department, each kind of level within an organization is comprised of people who come from many different backgrounds and perspectives too. So that's why we really recommend that you add on looking at, let's say, your survey findings by gender and comparing that to an organizational total to see where there might be, or with race or ethnicity or with age. It's not always really easy in analysis to literally combine this so that I can, provide a picture of what African-American women ages 22 to 34 think, right? Because that is a version of there's literally an infinite number of those combinations. But every time you're looking at different demographic cuts, you're helping bring some of this to life to better understand where there may be individuals who are experiencing the workplace in a different way.
So, Mary, you said earlier, Reggie, I'll come back. You have me back at any time and all that. So we're definitely going to have you back, because this is a really interesting, this topic in and of itself is interesting. And you talk about intersectionality, and intersects with so many other things as we talk about assessments and DE&I and so on and so forth. So I don't want to say to end this, but to kind of round it out for people, why is this important, this topic of assessments and doing internal benchmarking important, specifically as it relates to DE&I?
And where do you think it best fits in the strategy?
Sure. So it's really important because we really want data to help drive decisions. Data can be a great equalizer, right? It can help mitigate bias. It can help mitigate, some of the conflict and the disagreements that you may be having when there are differing perspectives internally by turning to the data, right? Data can also bring to light something that might be unknown. Some research that has come to light with the Great Resignation is the disconnect between leaders and employees. And I've been kind of making jokes about that I don't think they need to do research for any of us to know that leaders don't always truly understand what employees are thinking, feeling, and experiencing, right? There's a lot of misunderstanding there. But there's now research to indicate if you ask employers, the leaders, why are your people leaving? They give you totally different reasons than when you ask the employees who left too. So they're not getting it, right? And each side is not understanding each other. Data will help. And data helps with DEI strategy to be able to drive action that's going to have the greatest impact, so that you aren't just out there spinning your wheels or trying to cover all your bases when you really don't have the time budget, that you really can't. This will help you focus on where you'll have the greatest impact.
Well, that is Mary Hunter. She is the vice president of the assessment practice at the Kaleidoscope Group, and now the new co-host of our podcast called Becoming Inclusive. And that is Catherine Potts, the former co-host of this podcast.
Oh, Reggie.
Wow.
And I'm Reggie Ponder. I want to thank Mary for coming. Mary, really appreciate it. It's so interesting and very important what you put forth today. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you, Kat and Reggie, for having me. And thanks to all the listeners too. And we do have, our paper that does show the research that we did on benchmarking, and that should be available as a download to everyone too.
Yep, it definitely will be. And don't forget, everyone, share, let us know what you like, let us know what you don't like. All that feedback is helpful to us.
Thanks for joining us, and a special thanks to our subscribers. Consider becoming one today. Becoming Inclusive is presented by the Kaleidoscope Group, your full-service diversity, equity, and inclusion partner serving clients worldwide. Learn more and continue the conversation at kgdiversity.com.